Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Britt Frank. And she's here to share with us her new book, Align Your Mind, Tame Your Inner Critic, and Make Peace with Your Shadow using the power of parts work. So have you ever felt a part of you wants to change, but something keeps holding you back? Well, today's guest is going to share with us how to overcome just that. Britt Frank is a licensed neuropsychotherapist, keynote speaker, and author. She received her BA from Duke University and her MSW from the University of Kansas, where she later became an award-winning adjunct professor. Frank speaks and writes widely about the brain and how to get unstuck from even the most long-standing habits and patterns. Her work has been featured by New York Magazine, the New York Times, Forbes, NPR, Psychology Today, and many more. So welcome to the show, Britt Frank.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. Excited to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. So what even inspired you to write this?
So the question I get asked most often in my private practice as a therapist, and I'm sure people listening will relate, is this: why is it that part of me knows exactly what I need to do to make my life work? We know what to do: power down the screen, drink the water, phone a friend, hug a puppy. But this other part of me seems to take over. And the things that I know I want to do, I'm not doing. What's wrong with me? This book is the solve for that problem of why do I have parts of me that go left and parts of me that go right?
Well, that's so just interesting when we think about that. I'm sure you get a lot of people going, okay, so what do I do with all these different parts of me?
So it's such a great question, but we don't think to ask it because we don't think of our mind in terms of parts. Just like a body. I always tell people, think of your mind like a body that you just can't see, but you wouldn't approach your elbow with the same treatments that you would your liver. And so our mind is not this one giant blob that's out to destroy us and sabotage our goals. Our mind is like a team. It's a system of parts. Honestly, the movie Inside Out is the best description of how our minds work that I've ever seen. And the model of therapy that I practice that the book is based on is Inside Out, but taken, in a practical neuroscience-based way.
Well, that is a really simple way to explain it. So, how does the parts work really kind of differ from traditional therapeutic approaches?
Yeah, thank you, Pixar. I have no affiliation with them whatsoever, but feel free to call us because you nailed it with the therapy. And so, traditional psychotherapy, and I'm trained in the classic models of providing care, looks at the mind as a problem to be solved and looks at our symptoms as signs of disorder. But I can tell you, as someone who's had many, many mental health struggles, often what we think of as bad parts of us, like the parts of us who get anxious or the parts of us who feel critical or impostery, those parts are all trying to help us and they're all trying to do a job. And so I look at the mind not through the lens of what's wrong with me, but through the lens of what job is this part doing? And is there a better way to train it so that we can have a more harmonious experience being human? Our mind is our home. And for a lot of people, especially now, it's not a very nice home.
So, can you touch on that a little bit as what this day to day experience looks like when we look at our parts?
Sure. And I know a lot of people, when they first wake up, grab the phone and we're on the doom scroll. And now we're seeing every single terrible thing happening in every corner of the world. Then it's the arguing. I should get out of bed. I should eat healthy. I should go to the gym. Well, I don't feel like it. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? And then that self-criticism and that self-blame tend to echo throughout the day. We're not doing enough. We're doing too much. I should be helping people more. I really should say no and set better boundaries. And we are taught by popular culture to fight with ourselves. And it's in the language, you'll see it. Banish the inner critic. Tell your anxiety it's a liar and to take a hike. But if you're fighting with yourself, who's going to win? You can't ever win if you're fighting yourself. Parts work is the idea of we actually need to gather all these different aspects of ourself. Imagine like they're little people, put them around a big conference table. Let's have a team meeting and see if we can't get everyone to get along better with each other. And there are practical ways to do that the book outlines.
So, are there any problems that arise when we have these kind of meetings?
One of the problems that tends to come up when we start listening to ourselves is we are confronted with aspects of ourselves that aren't so pleasant and that aren't so nice. A lot of people who say, I'm such a good person, will discover that everyone has a part that's sort of selfish and sort of cranky, and if it doesn't have its morning meal, is going to be judgy or whatever. But the problem isn't that we have the parts. The problem isn't when we act out from the parts. Jealousy is not a problem until you start gossiping or acting in a certain way. Jealousy is a cue. It's a sign that someone is doing something that I desire. But if you're taught that jealousy is bad and any part of you that feels jealous needs to be ignored or beaten down, you're going to wrestle with yourself and you're going to lose, as evidenced by the mental health crisis that we are currently experiencing.
You write early on in your book that we're not lazy, crazy, or unmotivated. Why was it so important to include that in the early sections of your book?
Oh, well, as someone who personally struggled for multiple decades, I was truly convinced that the problem was that I was broken and lazy, crazy, and there's no such thing as a crazy person. Having a mental illness does not make one crazy, but lazy, crazy, and unmotivated are the words that I hear people day in and day out accuse themselves of being. I'm not doing the thing I know I want to do. I'm lazy. I have this goal, but I'm not taking the steps. I'm unmotivated. I keep dating the same person over and over, expecting a different result. I must be insane. And none of that is true. When we know how our minds and our brains work, then we can realize we have a lot more power than we even know. And there's no part of our mind that we need to fear when we learn how to speak its language.
Think you can do a mic drop on that. Oh my goodness. So, how does identifying different parts of the mind help us better understand inner conflict?
So, the idea of mindfulness, I think we're at a point where no one's going to argue that mindfulness is good. The act of observing our thoughts, noticing our thoughts, instead of I am my thoughts, it's okay, I'm noticing part of me feels angry. But the problem with mindfulness is it can feel really complicated. With my life, and I'm sure you feel the same, I don't always have an hour to get out my yoga mat and sit down and clear my head and focus and breathe. Sometimes I have 30 seconds in a day to do a mindfulness thing. Parts work is a mindfulness practice, and doing it doesn't take long. It's free. You don't need any special equipment to do it. And the very act of noticing that you have parts is going to slow down that flood of stress hormones and all of those chemicals that make us feel uncomfortable, which then compels us to act out our bad habits. So it's a really great starting point for making our lives work better.
Is there a moment when people are doing this type of work that they kind of have that aha, like, okay, I get this now. I can see where this inner conflict is arising and which parts I can really have communication with in order to move forward?
I think the point at which this all tends to click is when people realize that even the parts of you that want to do the thing you don't want to do, sitting on the couch versus exercising, ordering McDonald's instead of making your own whatever, when we understand that there's no part of us that's attacking us, even our language, we call it an anxiety attack and we battle depression and we fight addiction. But when we sort of hit pause on this idea that there are parts of us that we need to battle or fight, that changes the whole ballgame. Because if you walk into a room thinking, I need to prep for a fight, you're going to show up a lot different than if you're walking into a room thinking, okay, we may not agree on our methods, but everyone in this room has the same objective. And I didn't know this because it's not taught in grad school that brains are not wired for health and happiness. Brains are wired first for survival and energy conservation and going on autopilot. And so, in order to break our autopilot, which is where all of our habits come from, we have to start with the assumption your brain is on your side. That reality tends to click people into, oh, wow, wait, this doesn't mean I'm enabling myself. It doesn't mean I'm indulging. It means I understand what's going on. And so, from this place of understanding, I have more brain power available to solve it. So, parts work doesn't excuse lack of doing the things, but it gives you a frame for understanding it so you can move through your stuckness.
What are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about that inner critic?
And full disclaimer, I have one too. I have multiple inner critics, and I don't always enjoy what they say. But this voice inside that says, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. If they really knew who you were, they would hate you. The voice is not accurate. But that voice is intending to help. And so in the book, I talk about how you can change that mean inner critic into more of a high performance coach. If you look at coaches of top tier athletes, the coaches aren't necessarily nice. They're not going to pat someone on the head and say, oh, you don't feel like doing the workout today. No problem. Just take a nap. But a high performance coach isn't going to beat someone down and isn't going to just poke at them to poke at them. Our inner critic is like a coach with no training. And when you start working with that critical inner voice, you realize you have one of the greatest high performance coaches available to you all of the time living inside your mind.
In your book, you share about anxiety and you say it's our ally, not our enemy. I'd love for you to share on that.
That one's probably the one I get the most pushback on. How can you say that anxiety is our ally? We have a crisis with 30 million Americans being diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And so I'm not minimizing the suffering of people who struggle with anxiety because I'm one of them. But anxiety is not this cloud that's looming around you, waiting to pounce on you. I tell people, think of anxiety like your smoke alarm in your house. When the smoke alarm goes off, the alarm is not attacking you. The alarm is loud and it's annoying and it's inconvenient. But a smoke alarm that is screeching is saying, hey, we have a problem in this home. Somebody needs to do something. Anxiety is the smoke alarm of our brain. And it's a problem, but the anxiety itself is not what we need to fight. What we need to turn towards is what is tripping our brain's smoke alarm. Anxiety is never out of nowhere. It feels like it comes out of nowhere. But again, when you learn to speak the language of how parts work, then I can say, okay, I'm feeling like I'm about to pass out. So when I do keynote speaking, I might feel a rush of stress hormones and that anxiety in my stomach and in my mouth, and my hands are clenched. It feels like I'm about to get eaten by a lion. But I can say to my brain, I understand this is scary, but I'm actually not in any physical danger right now. And then I can do practices that I outline in the book for how to settle my physiology enough that I don't get stuck curled in a ball backstage.
So, how do people identify if they're having anxiety, fear, or worry?
Mm. Well, it helps to differentiate because we treat anxiety and fear and worry very much the same. And so, anxiety is that sense of something bad is going to happen, but I don't know even what it is. There's no specific story. I just feel impending doom. Fear is something is about to happen that I am worried about. I'm going to fail a test. I am going to mess up a presentation. I am not going to be able to make this business work. And our goal is to take this generalized sense of anxiety, turn it into a specific fear, at which point we can then make choices. Okay, if I know what my fear is about, now I can go to what are my options? And anywhere we're mindful of our choices, our brains will be less reactive, our inner critic will be less loud, and we'll be more inclined to make choices that align with our values versus doing things to numb out and take us out of the discomfort.
What are some things that people kind of get wrong about mindfulness? Because I hear about mindfulness all the time and I use the practice myself, but there's a lot of things that people think mindfulness is, it may not be.
And I love dismantling these myths because mindfulness is such a good practice that if you think it means one thing, people might not do it. And so, one of the biggest myths of mindfulness is that mindfulness requires you to clear your mind. My mind is not clear. I very seldom get to a state where my mind is blissfully quiet and it's the absence of all thought. Mindfulness is not just a quiet mind. Mindfulness is also the ability to observe the chatter in your mind. There's a lot of mindfulness practices that call it the monkey minds. And in that sense, you're taught anything you hear in your mind is wrong or bad, and you need to quiet it down. But mindfulness is also, let me just eavesdrop on my thoughts and see if I can pick up a theme here. Okay, it seems like all these parts of me are worried about being disconnected and lonely and feeling like no one will like us. Well, if I listen to that worry, I will notice perhaps I need more connection in my life. And then I can make choices that move me towards connection and a sense of belonging versus just trying to shut everyone up inside our head. Mindfulness also doesn't require you to be happy and calm. Mindfulness is about noticing and observing and making choices to respond rather than just reacting based on what we're feeling in any given moments.
So, to dovetail with that, why do you believe these flow states are so elusive for so many people? And how does this align with our role of accessing them?
So the flow state, which I didn't come up with, this idea that, we're sort of firing on all cylinders, and that's when the dancer becomes the dance and the athlete becomes the game, and we're sort of in the zone where time stops. I love being in a good flow state. I do. It's amazing when you get into that state. But it's really hard to access those flow states. And so being aligned doesn't mean that you're feeling super flowy, but being aligned means that you're in charge of all of those voices in your head that you can keep moving forward. And I can give you a quick example. One of my hobbies is to do aerial arts, like circus stuff. Think the big fabrics hanging from the ceiling and things like that. I'm not a professional athlete or a dancer. I don't get into this flowy state when I perform. I'm terrified. I feel nauseous. I have all the voices in my head yelling at me. But when I'm in charge, when I'm aligned, when I'm mindful, when I'm in a place of self leadership, then I can sort of guide myself through the performances. And I don't have to be in flow to do the things I want to do. And I don't have to be in flow to accomplish big things or show up as the person I want to show up as, which is nice because flow is great. But when it's not available, we have other options.
Oh, that's so good to hear because I think a lot of times people hear flow state and like, I've never had a flow state in my life. I don't know if I can get there, you know?
You don't have to, which is the great news. When they happen, excellent. But you don't need to be in flow to feel like a good version of yourself.
Can you share an example of how this process has had a major impact on you or maybe a client?
There's a practice that I use called micro yeses. So if you're not sure who the parts of you are and you're not sure where to even begin, whatever goal you have, whether it's quitting a habit, starting a habit, stopping a thing, starting a thing, whatever. A micro yes is the tool that I have seen transform for both myself and my clients in every area. A micro yes, most simply put, is the smallest possible thing that you can say yes to right now. Not when you feel like it, not after you sober up, not after you have the special journal with the really good pens. So I had a client who really desired to express herself creatively, but the idea of writing, even writing for 5 minutes a day, was too much. Her micro yes was to literally write down one word a day. That was it. A micro yes for a fitness goal is not take a walk after work. A micro yes for a fitness goal is literally put on one shoe and then go back to your couch and watch TV. That's it. And they sound silly, but the reason micro yeses work is because they're small enough that you can do them without your brain's alarm system getting triggered. Our brains don't like change. So all change, even positive change, is going to register to our brain as threatening. And that's where procrastination comes in, and stuckness and inertia and what we call laziness. So micro yeses allow you to build momentum. Momentum is much more powerful than motivation. I really love a good dopamine, let's go do the thing, but momentum will get the job done when you don't feel like it. Momentum will allow you to show up even when you're tired or sad or cold or whatever. And so I've seen micro yeses work for creative goals, for professional goals, for relationship goals, for how people relate to themselves. A micro yes is anything that you're willing to say yes to now. And they don't look like much, but they will change your life.
Oh, I love that. That makes it so bite-sized and so easy for people.
Yes. And people are quick to devalue easy as well. If it's not hard, it's not worth doing. And that sounds great. But again, with momentum, you're better off doing a micro yes every day than every 6 months doing a big thing and then crashing and burning and not doing it again for another 6 months. New Year's Day goals fail because they're too big. I'm going to quit the drinking and I'm going to lose the weight and I'm going to start running 10 miles a day. No one wants to do micro yeses because they're too easy, but you do those easy steps. Eventually you pick up momentum. Then the steps can get bigger without you losing your momentum.
Well, let's talk about work that I think most people shy away from, and it's shadow work. And I know in your book you call it the gifts of hidden parts. And I think for a lot of people, they're like, well, it's the shadow side of me. I don't think I want to know about that.
It's so funny. So, first define shadow work is just the process of getting connected with parts of yourself that you're not connected with. And for some people, it's negative qualities. Like, I don't want to admit that parts of me are jealous and petty and catty. But for a lot of people, their shadow parts are their power and their creativity and their joy and their pleasure. So when someone says to me, I'm just not a creative person, I'm like, uh-oh, we have a shadow in the house because everyone is creative. Creativity doesn't always mean paint something or make art. Everyone is creative, and creativity is really good for our physical and mental health. So shadow work is the process of getting honest with yourself about all of the parts of yourself without beating yourself up. And there are very gentle ways to do it. It's not when I turned in the shadow chapter to my editor, they were like, well, I thought shadow work was all about our negative qualities. And I'm like, a lot of people are very connected to their negative qualities, but it's their positive qualities that they feel most disconnected from. So shadow work for someone that's not used to playing, someone who's used to grinding it out 100 hours a week in the office doesn't need to do shadow work on work ethic. They might need to do shadow work on playfulness. And all of that work is very worth doing.
In your book, you challenge the idea that personality is fixed. How can parts work help someone change long held patterns?
Mm. And there's a lot of debate in the academic world about what is personality, right? Because you can't study it, you can't put it in a test tube. So the parts work lens, and again, I didn't invent parts work. This book is my spin on it. The parts work lens assumes that your personality is not one but many. The personality that I'm speaking to you right now with is not going to sound the same as my personality in an hour when I'm going to dinner with a girlfriend. And that doesn't mean I'm being fake now. It just means my personality is multifaceted. I have a work personality. I have a with my girlfriend's personality. I have a home with my husband personality. I have a alone by myself personality. And so your personality can't be fixed because you have more than one. And this idea that we all have multiple personalities tends to scare people because of all those 1980s movies about multiple personality disorder. But it's not a disorder. It's how we're designed. We all have multiple ways that we show up in the world, all of which are authentic and all of which are, intending to be good. Not all of them show up in healthy ways. But even our personalities, when people are like, I have an addictive personality, I said, I have one of those too. But they're not all addictive. I have some personalities that are really disciplined, and I have some that are really compulsive, and I have some that are really rigid, and some that are really flexible. And so if we define personality as something more nuanced and complex than what we were taught, then again, the whole game changes, because then it's not my personality is either broken or healthy, normal or disordered. It's all right, well, which of my personalities is causing problems right now? And then how do I help her? Not how do I get rid of her?
What's one small step our listeners can take right now to begin to align their own mind?
Oh, I love that question. So I would encourage anyone listening to first ask yourself, what's your micro yes going to be? Because a micro yes is something you do right now. It's something so easy you feel silly and ridiculous doing it. So when you're done listening, pick a micro yes and do it. And then bonus if you share that with someone. So micro yeses will compound faster when you do them with a friend. So that would be my first one. And then my second one would be for anyone listening, the first step to aligning your mind is to acknowledge that your mind is on your side. That doesn't mean it's always healthy, helpful, or kind, but let's start with the assumption, what if you started with my mind is on my side? How would you respond differently? How would you approach your thinking differently? And validating a thought doesn't mean you agree with it, but validating a thought is your first step in slowing down the storm of thinking that often feels like it's attacking us. So validating a thought does not mean agreeing or co-signing on it. And that's the first step to align. Acknowledge that you're having a thought. A part of you feels away. Let's just start by acknowledging it.
Well, Britt, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Thank you so much. And I really do love this work. It's changed everything. So you can find me on my website, brittfrank.com, Instagram at brittfrank, and please say hello.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you, Britt. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Align Your Mind. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Mary Ann, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Mary Ann is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Mary Ann will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmaryann.com for more information.